Welcome back to another episode of the Epic Investor Podcast. I'm here today with Rich Jarvis. My name is Jason Morris. Today we're going to dive into acquiring with purpose, how business acquisition isn't just acquiring businesses, but it's building a kingdom, building an empire as we refer to it. And when done the right way, buying a business allows you to preserve legacy and to create impact in communities and in the lives of many people. So with that, let's dive in. I'd kind of just like to lead with a question for you of when you think about buying a business, what are some of the first things that cross your mind?
How much cash is it going to produce? Can I afford this? How much time is it going to take? Who am I actually getting involved in business with, right? What are the products or services? What do they actually deliver? And does it matter?
It's always fun, you talk about acquiring a whole bunch of subways or, acquiring a skydiving facility. But it's really interesting to me in the short time that I've, been in private equity and at business acquisition for 15, 20 years is after you've done it and after you've been through it, you start to ask different questions and you start to feel differently about, I don't really care if it's sexy or if it's, if it's braggadocious. I start to ask questions now like, well, who are the people that are there? And who do they impact and what service do they really offer? And then in due diligence now, you're always looking at the P&L, you're always looking at the bottom line. It's got to make sense. It's got to pencil. You've got a fiduciary responsibility there, but really a lot of the time is spent on who is part of this acquisition and is the seller on board? Are they coming as part of the deal? How long have the employees been there? How do I fit into it? Am I going to need a partner that's going to help me run this?
What kind of legacy have they left, and how can you build on that and make it even better?
Great segue, Rich, into the very first point of acquiring with purpose. It's that legacy. And when you understand the legacy that you are acquiring, the whole acquisition, it seems to take a different shape. It seems to have a deeper meaning to you than just numbers and a transaction. And I think fondly of the experience you and I had together when we walked through that company that we wanted to acquire and sat down with the sellers after doing a tour. And that word legacy came up several times. And I remember feeling like we were being interviewed. We were there obviously to scrutinize and, give it the sniff test. But I did feel like they wanted to know, what is your reason for buying our company? And what are you really going to do for the business in the long haul? And I remember, because of our principles and because of our guiding points, legacy is very important to us. It's important, to the point that we're willing to talk wide open about it. And not to belabor that experience, but I remember before leaving, I remember them saying, this wasn't as intimidating as I thought it would be. And the fact that you care about our people and you ask lots of questions and you want them to be involved, I believe that's what won them over and got us to the finish line. But again, the point being, when you understand why, what the purpose of that acquisition is and the legacy that you're inheriting, it takes on a different shape. So then I'd ask again, Rich, if you were to go and find a company that's for sale, how does that shift? How does that shift your mental process of pursuing legacy rather than just pursuing dollars?
I think the example of that manufacturer is a really good one, because first you have to answer the investment thesis, right? Does it match your buy box? Does it match, the goals we were trying to accomplish? And is it going to be essentially a fit on paper? So if that didn't happen, it won't get to the point where you can start talking about the legacy. And in fact, if the numbers, we call it a reservoir analysis that you introduced me to, Jason, and what I loved about that is it just took the last 3 years, average EBITDA, you have the money coming in, all of the stuff that's going to go out in acquiring the business, whether it's senior debt, investor payments, management fees, your C-suite, all of that together, what's left over, that's called that reservoir. How much is in that reservoir? And if it didn't work out, we would never have gotten to the point. But But when you satisfy that side of it, saying that it will cash flow, it will do that, then I think you can take on a whole different level of or due diligence, really, on and move to identifying that legacy and giving purpose behind the actual acquisition rather than just a transaction.
Yeah, I hear you saying, you get out of the weeds of the for me anyway, you get out of the weeds of the boring. You've satisfied it, right? You've settled it, you've proven that it works, and now you get to give it your heart. Now you get to give it who you are and the purpose that you have behind acquiring businesses, which is to serve communities and serve people, because you already know that the financial side makes sense. Is that what I understand?
Yeah, I think it's almost a sandwich, if you will. You begin with that's what you want to accomplish as a mission for your company, right? Because if you don't have that there, then the shiny object will take over and something will be pretty attractive, but yet not really fulfill that side.
When you acquire a business and you've moved on from the financials, the P&L, the balance sheet, the reservoir analysis, it cash flows, it works. You're not just acquiring a P&L anymore. You're not just acquiring revenue or EBITDA. Now you are acquiring stewardship and responsibility over people. And it leads me into my second point of what really makes a business strong. What, like, the strength of a business, we always look at it as, well, what do the financials say, right? The business is strong if it's constantly cash flowing, consecutively. But you're totally right? And I wanted to illustrate that, and I appreciate you pointing that out. We always gravitate to what's the strength of the business, how healthy is it, and we always go to financials, which is important, right? You have to satisfy that, to your previous point. But it is not the strength of the business. The strength of the business is in the people and its processes that are executed consistently. You take care of the finances, and then the rest of the time is spent in what is the nucleus, what is the soul of this business, and who are the people that are behind it. Which, by the way, gets a little tricky because you don't get to really talk to the people in the business until it's closed. And so you spend a lot of time reading employee files. You spend a lot of time talking to the sellers. There may be rare occasions where you can talk to people about what they know about the company and not give anything away. But when you understand who, and not what you're acquiring, but who is coming with it, it takes on a whole new life form, and it makes me feel that stewardship of leadership and responsibility in the acquisition, and not just walking in and driving numbers in front of people.
Just the concept between ownership versus stewardship. You could own something and not really take care of it or even value it. But as a steward, I think it's a different level of ownership that takes much more attention, and it adds purpose to ownership, really.
Yeah. And I'm curious, what do you think that does to the people in that business when they see that kind of leadership coming in?
Let's contrast that with companies that aren't, or do the opposite, right? That are very transactional in nature. How many of us have actually worked in a scenario or environment that, well, some people call it toxic. I think toxic would be a common adjective to describe it. But I think the fundamental root is it becomes transactional in nature and removes the person. I'm convinced that you cannot achieve extraordinary levels of performance with an approach that removes the person. You just can't, if it's just transactional in nature.
I get way more excited about the soul and the legacy of a company than, the widgets that it produces or the service that it renders. Because while they're important and while they're in need and while they support the P&L and the financial structure, I have way more fun, growing a business where you've got a soul and you've got people that are ingrained in it. And I've worked in a couple of situations, most recently actually, where we asked people the direct question, and we were prepared for a small exodus of people when we challenged them as to why they were with our company. If you're just here for a paycheck, there are lots of other places that will give you a paycheck, but you better be here because you want you want to offer this service to people. And we identified why. Why are we in business? What service, like what is our business model, right? It's not, for example, it's not just transporting
Is that
people.
when you had the sword?
Yes, that's the sword that's behind me.
Okay, you've got to tell that story because that is impactful. One of the things I love about impact equity, Jason, is you are relentless on getting the numbers, and the metrics to make sure that things are healthy and strong and moving in the right direction. And I would say you are equally relentless on focusing on people. And I think a lot of times in conversations like this, it's like a pendulum. It can swing too far one way or the other. If it's all metrics, all transactional, and no people involved, there's just a lack of, well, not empathy, but just a lack. It just ending it there. There's a lack of drive, of purpose, right? There's nothing there. And then if you swing all the way to the other side, where it's all about people that just like being together and not getting anything done, that doesn't work either, right? So I think what I like the most about what you've done is really reined in both of those and put them together, and that's when the magic happens.
This sword story that I have behind me, it's about the Alamo. We had a pretty toxic. We inherited a toxic environment, and really, people you could tell that they weren't in it. It was easy for them to call in sick. It was easy for them to just bail out early. It was easy for them to buck accountability and responsibility and let someone else handle it, to the point where, as the CEO, I'm more than willing to do everything that the company requires and every service within it. But when I start doing all of the work, there's a serious toxic, cancerous problem. And I was out 2 a.m. running trips because they needed to be done. So I finally got to like my breaking point, of all right, something's got to give. And so we started having one-on-ones where we would ask people, what do you want here? What's your end goal? Where do you want to be? What do you want to do as you progress? Certainly this isn't going to be your career forever. And how do we help you? And you could tell that there was just this mentality of whatever, and I'm here for the check until it doesn't clear. And so I brought, because it was a 24-hour business, Sunday morning at like 7 a.m., between 7 and 9 a.m. was like our slowest time of the week. We had like 1 or 2 transports going on. And so I brought everybody to this conference room at a hotel. We paid $50 for the room and brought in donuts and coffee and, everything to entice people to be at a mandatory meeting.
On a Sunday morning, nonetheless.
Yeah, early morning, right? It's a tough ask, especially in we're in Kansas City, and I mean, chief football is everything on Sunday. But nonetheless, it was a mandatory meeting. We get there, and we go through some housekeeping items. We talk about metrics. We talk about all of the numbers that matter, the levers that we control. And then I showed this 5-minute clip of the Alamo with John Wayne, is the clip that I chose because I love John Wayne. And when the clip was over, I pulled out my sword and drug it across the carpet. And I'm sure I snagged a couple of fibers on it, but I drug it across the carpet. And I looked at everybody and I said, you get to choose today if you're going to be part of the future of this company, or if you'd like to just hang back and be part of the old company. And if that's the case, you are welcome to leave. And I honestly, Rich, expected about 40% of the people to leave. And I was prepared to face it. After my meetings, after these one-on-ones with everyone, I thought, this is what it's going to take. It's going to take a major movement to help people understand that we're serious, that we're not just here for the numbers. We're not just here for the revenue. This was a specific transportation business to the elderly, and it mattered. Every single trip could have been their last trip before they pass. And when you consider that is your job, is to transport this person from point A to point B, and it could be the last experience they have in life, boy, that is much deeper than, hey, did you log my last 30-minute trip? Now conversations were wrapped around, what was their name? Where are they from? What's their spouse's name? Do they have children? Because it would force our drivers to have conversations with these people instead of turning up the radio or just, whatever. So that's the story of the sword. That's the story of stewardship. It's the story of diving into people and why we're there rather than, hey, we hit our $15,000 mark yesterday. Good job, guys. Let's go get it again.
I can picture us on the next investor meeting, you walking in your dressed up garb and wielding that sword high and saying, here's the line. I love it.
Well, I truly, Rich, I truly enjoy those moments. For me, I don't forget those. When I was growing up and when I had great mentors in my career, you don't forget those visuals, right? Why is my boss standing in front of me with a sword, in a hotel room or a hotel conference room at Kansas City, right? They don't forget that imagery. But truthfully, my reason was because we had inherited the legacy of someone's company that had been running for 15 years. And it's not going to die on my watch. It's not going to be undone on my watch. And again, when you go back to acquiring with purpose, it takes on an entirely new life form. It has deeper meaning. It's no longer about, I got to pay the debt service. It's, how do I impact her life? How do I impact his life? How do I help them rise to the goals that they want? And that is what pushes the legacy further. And then frankly, your business actually catches fire and it actually becomes easier to grow because you're not questioning what we're doing or why we're doing it. It's now commonplace. It's known. It's a beautiful feeling. This is not just as simple as getting in and figuring it out. It's not as simple as, spending an hour or a dinner night with the sellers and understanding their legacy. It really begins with understanding the people that you work for. And I say that intentionally. You can be an owner, you can be a manager. We work for people. We manage people. We manage, these stewardships with vendors and with all stakeholders. But my responsibility is to provide leadership. It's provide training. It's to provide direction and vision. And therefore, I work for you in that regard as an employee. And so understanding those pieces will help you arrive at understanding what it is and what that legacy means. And then when you start hiring people, you're not just hiring a position. You're not just filling a box. You're not just filling a seat on the bus. You are hiring character. You're hiring quality. And I remember an experience I had. I was being interviewed to go work for another company years ago. And I had like 5 interviews and I finally got to the CEO. And the CEO said, we're not going to talk about business. We're not going to talk about processes. All of my managers have done that already. I want to talk about you. I want to talk about where you've been, what you've done, what your goals are. My intention here is to see if you're a character fit for our organization. And I loved that. I appreciated him spending, 20 minutes of his day diving into understanding whether or not I was a good culture fit for the legacy that he was developing, creating. And so as acquisitionists or as business owners, it starts with first learning what you're getting into. But then as you continue to grow and you're bringing on more people, you have a very important responsibility to keep that legacy and to keep the culture intact.
Well, I think those that have built businesses in the past have a different level of appreciation for those businesses that are selling than those that have never started a business to begin with. And, people don't realize literally the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into building something up over the decades, right? Then you can take it from there and someone else can take it from there and rise to another level. It's a form of honoring others, honoring their labors, their legacy, essentially. And it doesn't mean that the legacy has to remain exactly the same, but it can honor those that have come before and put their effort into it. And then you can take what they've built and that creates the foundation for something beautiful in the future that you can create. And I love that.
I think that when people really start to identify the purpose behind their acquisition, big or small, doesn't matter. It can be a bolt-on. It can be a big acquisition. But when you really know the purpose And when you really start to learn who is involved in that acquisition and the legacy that has gone before, that has come beforehand, and the blood, sweat, and tears that went into creating it, boy, you start to feel that the true stewardship of what you are acquiring and getting into. And when handled correctly, it creates a whole lot of momentum, a whole lot of really positive energy, and everybody benefits from that kind of process. So, well, I think to summarize, Rich, the conversation we've had today, it really is heartwarming. It really invigorates me again. It reminds me of the passion of acquiring with purpose. And when you understand that these types of acquisitions are not just transactional, but they're kingdom building. It's building this empire. But what is that empire? It's families, it's people, it's legacy. And when you dive deeper and you empower those people within to help continue that legacy and to shape their lives and to shape the benefactors of the business that is being acquired, that's the true ROI, the return on the return of impact, not necessarily the investment, but the impact that is made is impactful. For those that are out acquiring or those that are looking to acquire, when managed appropriately, it can be quite beautiful. And if there's any of you that are out there listening that might be in the middle of an acquisition and maybe you feel like you're just totally into the numbers and you're in the weeds, I get it. I can appreciate why you're there. Give us a call. We'd love to hear your story. We'd love to talk to you about it. I'm happy to even coach along, ways that you can protect yourself from just letting that pendulum swing to the finance side and come back over into the more heartwarming, enjoyable side of legacy and people. So thanks for listening. Please share it. Please like, subscribe. We'd love to hear all of your thoughts and your experiences. So with that, thanks for listening.